We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our guest this morning is Tennessee reporter Dave Boucher, who's authored a piece that was in the Tennessean that we continue to talk about from a few weeks back, the case of Elbert Thornton. Again, the state classifying his death as natural causes. Again, you touched a bit on some of the injuries that he appeared to have had. Beyond we talked about broken ribs, which could have been the result of resuscitation, but then the examiner said there were some older fractures, right?
That's right. There is a chance that, you know, when you're trying to revive somebody, that you can see a break, but some of the nature of the healing that our medical examiner found seemed to indicate that some of these injuries were older and could not have happened the day that he was found.
Okay, broken breastbone, severe burns to his genitals, which, you know, one of the arguments as to how he got that was perhaps he spilled some hot water on his groin.
Correct.
That happens every day.
Sure.
Okay,
and there are questions as to, even if that did happen, why didn't he receive the medical treatment that he needed? Again, this is not what the family believes happened.
What do they believe happened?
The family believes that he was tortured. They aren't just, and this is again based on what they've read in this medical examiner's report. They're obviously not interviewing anybody that he was around in the prison.
Right.
They're not interviewing the correctional officers, but this is based on the type of injuries that they have. They believe that he was tortured.
Okay, and again, that all you can do is what you've been able to glean, but again, you know, the medical records there at the prison, because of HIPAA, are off limits. You know, this isn't a secure environment. I mean, now you wonder, is there surveillance video somewhere of something?
Sure.
Was he a rabble-rouser that maybe, you know, I mean, you wonder if he was tortured, what was the motivation for that? Not that there is anything to justify it, but you wonder, I mean, what kind of inmate was he?
Yeah, and these are all viable questions. I mean, his daughter said that the other inmates there, I think they called him Grandpa, or that he was slightly older than some of the other inmates that were there. He didn't mention any issues with her. Obviously, you wouldn't imagine that a father would necessarily get into the issues. But as you note, regardless of whether or not he is a rabble-rouser or a model inmate, there are still significant questions to answer as to how he got these injuries and to how he died. And that's kind of what we wanted to pose with the story, is that here's the information we have, both from the medical examiner and from the coroner's report and from the family, and then on the other side from the state and from the local district attorney. And we think that there are still questions that deserve answers.
Yeah, no question. Look, this is America, all right? This is not the Gulag. This is not some, you know, hole-in-the-ground prison in China where this stuff, you know, no one cares about. I mean, you have to care for the inmates, and that's how you're judged as a civilization, man.
Sure.
If you abuse the poorest or it's just wrong. I mean, they need to be incarcerated, but it doesn't give license for this kind of thing to happen. Let's take a call from Ann. Ann, good morning.
Good morning. I just have a quick question. I'm just an everyday citizen, but I have spent the better part of the last 2 years helping my community with the ridding of a family. So how does an average citizen find out who the correction officers are and what constitutes probation violations? Because the average citizen doesn't know these things, and it was quite difficult for me, and I did find it out. But it was a lengthy process for me to find out, and had I been able to find these things out, and had I been able to communicate with probation officers, my community would have been a safer community much sooner.
Okay. You're not a probation officer, but I mean, as you do your investigations, and you talked about how probation may be different in other states.
Sure.
How would you answer?
Just in my research for what constitutes a probation violation and what doesn't, I've talked to prison advocates. I mean, I have a couple who just were once inmates or know about being an inmate and know what constitutes a violation. These obviously violations can change, so it's good to keep up to date. I mean, I would just suggest either calling the state or trying to do your own research online. That tends to be what I've been able to do. I don't know about finding the identities of correctional officers. The state has been very cautious about releasing what they call rosters from the prisons just for safety purposes.
I can understand that.
Right, and we've seen rosters, and other media have seen rosters rosters, but it's more to see the vacancies or how long officers working, as opposed to printing the name of every officer that works at a correctional facility.
Right.
So I'm not sure that information is readily available by any means. But what constitutes a violation of parole or probation certainly is, and is available either online or going through the state. I'm sorry that that's not more specific.
No, but well, you're not a parole officer, but I agree. That's the answer I would have given her as well. Let's go to Wayne. Wayne, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey, Wayne.
As far as the parole board is controlled by the commissioner. It's controlled by the Department of Corrections. Years ago, my son was injured at Turney Center. On a Thursday, he called and told me, he said, Daddy, I'm going to get robbed tonight. And I said, son, how are you going to get robbed? You're in prison. He said, well, so my teacher came to me today. He was taking a course and told me I was going to be robbed. And he went back to his cell, his pod, which had 48 inmates. And the guard told him, said, hey, he said, you're going to get robbed tonight. He said, do whatever you have to do, and I'll take care of it. And so my son was in the cell. They got locked doors. You got to have a key to open it up. And 8 gang members from the white supremacist group was going to rob him and take everything he had. So 4 of them went in. He kicked him out the door. Tried to shut the door and lock it, and he couldn't do it. So 8 of them beat him up, broke his nose, fractured him under both eyes.
Where were the guards?
The guard left the pod.
They just kind of intentionally, or you think they were just short-staffed and not in that sector?
Well, they had one guard to guard 48 prisoners.
Yeah, see, that's what he describes there. I mean, that could be, along the lines of what happened here, I guess. Who knows? If your situation with Elbert here could have been he did it to himself and had issues like the correction says, or other inmates, or even guards. Maybe we don't know, right?
Sure, that's right. And as your caller noted, there have been situations where correctional officers will say, I'm one correctional officer for at times 100 inmates or 200 inmates, and certainly they are not comfortable with that. I've heard from other inmates who know, obviously, where the correctional officers are while they're working, and so that can create an inherently dangerous situation both for officers and for inmates. I obviously don't know what happened in this specific case, and we don't know specifically what happened in Mr. Thornton's case.
Yeah, you know what I was just thinking about with this Thornton situation? If the same exact type of scenario happened, say, to my brother or your brother, maybe they were off and they live in an apartment and they're at college, and they turn up dead, and they have all of these injuries, and a medical examiner tells me there's natural causes, and this is outside the prison realm.
Sure.
Can you imagine the fuss that would be blown? Are you crazy? There would be so much more done. Now, you dug this up yourself, but you and I would be responding to the scene of an apartment where the same thing happened, and then the reports in the police filing would be beatings, burnings, broken bones, crushed chest.
Sure.
It would become a criminal investigation.
And you would imagine that you would be able to find out information from that investigation.
Right.
The Tennessee Department of Correction won't release, and it says it can't release, its investigation.
No,
so we don't even know what they looked at. We know that there was an investigation. They say that there was an investigation, but we also know that they concluded from that investigation that it was natural, which is apparently not what the medical examiner's report says, the coroner's report says, or the outside expert that we talked to.
And so at this point, if they were all of a sudden say, okay, come on in, we'll give you anything you want, what is there anything more that you would want besides it? What would you ask for?
Absolutely. I think the 2 things that we talked about, one, I'd love to see the medical records for Mr. Thornton, just to look at this notion that there was some sort of illness or medical issue that could have caused these injuries. Mind you, in the coroner's report, the coroner lists a litany of previous health concerns that Mr. Thornton had, including hepatitis C or previous drug abuse or suffering from a couple other issues. So the medical examiner knew about all of this and still decided that the cause of death couldn't be determined, but the manner of death was this multiple blunt and thermal traumatic injuries. So it would be interesting to see what the state believes they're reading in these medical records that apparently, at least to some extent, the medical examiner could not. It would also be interesting to see the extent of the investigation, and that's another aspect of the story here about what the investigators actually did to determine that this was a natural death. And that's kind of been called into question by the former warden, who was the warden at West 10 at the time.
That's the issue here, really. It comes down to, what kind of investigation was done. what happens when you're basically investigating yourself and everything, because of the nature of prisons and HIPAA, is shrouded in secrecy. So you have to trust that things are done right because there's no one who can watch this. I mean, is that right? There's just no one who can.
In theory, both the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, the TBI, or the local DA could investigate this.
See, both of them would likely become involved with the scenario I gave you if this individual turned up dead at an apartment complex outside Vanderbilt, okay?
Sure.
But in this case, there's no criminal investigation.
And this is a point of contention that I think is interesting to note. When I spoke with the department, they said that they referred this case to the local DA at the time, who determined that this was not a homicide. However, when I talked to the DA, who was the same DA, he told me that he hadn't reviewed this case until I sent it to him. He still decided and said that because there wasn't essentially it appears because there wasn't a box-checked homicide on this medical report, that he wouldn't move forward with this investigation. But clearly he didn't review it at the time and is going solely off of this department investigation that we can't see.
Which did not check homicide, it checked natural causes.
It checked, well, the department said natural causes. 2 other reports say suspicious or could not be determined.
And he had access to all of that?
We think so.
And his basis for then, when you brought it to him for not saying, well, you know, maybe I should look at this more, was?
He wouldn't get into specific details as to why the fact that this couldn't be determined wouldn't warrant an additional investigation. He did one of those things where you refer any medical questions to a medical expert.
It's because it's an inmate, and outside of that inmate's immediate family that maybe has limited resources, no one else is going to make a fuss unless you do an article. We'll take a break. We'll be back with more right after this.